for Putin, empty threats are such a clear sign of a weak leader. So he's not going to respond to that. So I think, it's time now for Donald Trump to put his money where his mouth is.
President Trump has criticised Vladimir Putin after widespread Russian bombardment of Ukraine this weekend. Writing on Truth Social, Trump said the Russian leader had gone, quote, absolutely crazy, unquote, before speaking to reporters in Washington on Sunday night.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President Trump also directed his fury at President Zelensky, saying he is doing his country no favours by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop. Russia then launched 355 drone strikes and 9 missiles on Sunday, this coming despite the two countries exchanging hundreds of prisoners over the last few days. To talk all things Ukraine, we're joined by our man in Kiev. It's the Times Ukraine correspondent, Maxim Tucker. Maxim, good afternoon. Thanks for being with us today.
Good afternoon.
Maybe take us through these attacks and how they compare to other phases of Russia's offensive.
So it's 3 days of solid attacks across the country, with a particular intensity focusing on Kiev. I mean, I'm in Kiev now, and I've been listening to night after night these consolidated attacks. They're very focused, but they also go on for a very long time. So from about midnight till 6 in the morning on the first night. And you had ballistic missiles that making a huge impact sound across the city, fireballs going up above the tall buildings. It really is a kind of apocalyptic scenes in Kiev for the last 3 days, and everyone obviously has had very little sleep because it's been sustained. I think this is a measure of how much the Russian war machine has now ramped up. The West failed to give Ukraine all the resources it needed to defeat Russia when it may have been able to do that. And now Russia has ramped up its industrial capabilities to focus on producing these drones at such a scale. So we've had an increasing number day after day, from 270 to 355 last night. And it really is showing that Russia is not intending to stop this war anytime soon.
This comes with the backdrop of the prisoner exchange. I think they said 1,000 Russian exchanges for 1,000 Ukrainians, and the footage of that suggests that takes a certain level of cooperation, Maxim, to an extent. So it does seem to beg the question: how can you do one thing with one hand and another with the other?
Right. So it was the only concession made really by Russia at the Istanbul talks a couple of weeks ago. And 1,000 for 1,000, yes, there's a logistical requirement to cooperate on that. It sounded like the Russian side, they didn't compile lists, they didn't inform the Ukrainians who they were returning, they just returned whoever they wanted, and the Ukrainians did the same. So they just literally rocked up at the border with 1,000 people, around 300 every day for 3 consecutive days, and the Ukrainians did the same. So there is some coordination, obviously, to have a ceasefire at the point of delivery, but actually there isn't a very in-depth communication beyond that. And it really, I think, is a token gesture by the Russians to show the Americans that something is happening, but there's no movement towards any kind of ceasefire or any kind of meaningful peace deal. And Russia just keeps repeating its rhetoric about ending the root causes of the conflict, which is essentially removing Zelensky's government. And I think, Russia made a decision to strike Kiev and other cities across Ukraine at the same time as this prisoner exchange. So I think it's sending quite a clear message to the Ukrainians that we're returning your prisoners, but we're not ending this war.
Well, enter centre stage Donald Trump over the weekend, and you heard some of his comments there. I'm sure you've been paying close attention to them. Where is he on all of this at the moment? Because you get the sense at one stage he's fed up, and at another he's furious, another he feels thwarted or upset by the behaviour, if you like, of Vladimir Putin. It all seems very peculiar.
Well, it's very peculiar, and particularly given if he's repeatedly said that he's fed up and tired of what the Russians are doing, but he still takes no action against them. And I think what was interesting in that clip that you played, that if you played it a little bit longer, the reporter then says, "What are you going to do about it?" And Donald Trump gets very angry and aggressive and says, "You're the fake news media, aren't you?" So still, he's not looking to take action to kind of demonstrate to Russia that what it's doing is not acceptable. And for Putin, empty threats are such a clear sign of a weak leader. So he's not going to respond to that. So I think, it's time now for Donald Trump to put his money where his mouth is.
He also did that thing he does, which is say there's bad on both sides, and then he went for Zelensky. I mean, is this an attempt to show some sense of neutrality or diplomacy of some description?
Well, I think the repeated attacks on Ukraine, the repeated attacks on Zelensky, who hasn't really said much of late, apart from hinting that the world needs to see some strong leadership, is part of building this case for an excuse to walk away from Ukraine, an excuse to stop support for Ukraine. As you know, the only action that Donald Trump has really taken on this conflict is to temporarily withdraw support from Ukraine and then provide a very small amount, 50 million, of military assistance. The minerals deal hasn't gone into effect. We'll see if that allows the US to make some contributions under the understanding that it will be able to recoup the cost of military aid from profits under the investment fund that it's set up with Ukraine. But there hasn't been a lot of action to back up all the words that Donald Trump has delivered in his more than 100 days of office.
You heard Trump has been saying that Putin doesn't want this war to end, that he feels that he's winning and therefore things are good on the ground, quote unquote. Is there truth in that?
Yeah, it's a relief that he's finally realized that Putin has no interest in ending the war. Putin is, technically they're doing better than the Ukrainians. They're able to deliver these very long-range strikes against the capital throughout the country. They are pushing forward. They are making technological developments with this huge war economy that they have now. Yesterday there was a first-person view drone strike on Kharkiv, which is more than 25 kilometers away from the front, which is a very dangerous development for the Ukrainians. Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city, and if you have first person view, these are very small drones, kind of battery powered drones, now able to attack cities so far behind the front line. It's going to make it very difficult to find any safe place for Ukrainian civilians inside the country.
Talk to me, if you can, a little bit about the people who died in the recent attacks. How much do we know about them?
So yeah, as ever, it's tragic cases. There's a family, three siblings who were killed in the latest attack. And I also met with a family who there was a soldier. He'd just come back from the front. He'd been spending 2 weeks with his family, and a drone strike hit his house he hit the ground floor, so where his wife had been sheltering with his 4-year-old son, and his wife was killed trying to protect her son, and the 4-year-old is very badly wounded. He's in hospital now. He's had an operation. He's likely blinded for life, and it's just devastating to talk to these people whose lives are just ruined in an instant, and to understand that nothing is being done about it.
So I mean, if Russia's building many more missiles and drones than they need, does that mean we can expect more attacks like this as going into the next weeks and months?
Yeah, I think the only thing that's been kind of helpful for Ukraine at the moment is there's been kind of unseasonal rains throughout May, a lot of cloud cover. And when that comes in, that starts to make it more difficult for Russia to coordinate these drone strikes. Also, a lot of rain makes it more difficult to advance. It's very muddy. It's difficult for troops on the ground to move forward. It's difficult for logistics. So that may help slow things down. But I think at this point, Ukraine is it's rationing its weapons. A big question is how many Patriot missiles will be left for Ukraine to defend its major cities. Those are essential. Those are the only system that are capable of defeating Russia's ballistic missiles. But Russia is also adapting. It's upgrading its ballistic missiles. It's learned actually from Storm Shadow and other kinds of missiles that have been provided by the West, to use similar technology, missile traps that help the ballistic missiles evade air defenses. And they're having successes as a result of that. And at the moment, Ukraine is not enjoying the level of US support to keep up with that. And that, is causing Ukrainians to wonder when will they get a significant package, or if they will get a significant package of US support. And if that doesn't come, what is Europe going to do about it?
Maxim, what is it, how easy is it to operate at a human level in Kiev at the moment? I mean, obviously the mood is somber, but on day to day, is everything open? Are people able to have any class of normality, or is it life on the edge?
Well, I mean, there is a kind of a solidarity in the fact that everyone in the city is exhausted because of these 3 days of strikes. But Ukrainians are very determined. They're determined to carry on. They're determined to live their lives. They're determined not to give in to Russia's essential terrorizing of their cities. Over the weekend there was actually a wine festival celebrating Ukrainian wine, and I think a lot of Ukrainians have responded by trying to embrace their heritage, their culture, their national pride, and trying to enjoy activities which celebrate that. Ukrainian theatre has enjoyed a renaissance, Ukrainian wine has enjoyed a renaissance, Ukrainian fashion has enjoyed a renaissance. So people have reacted to it in different ways. I mean, Kiev's still a functioning city. Obviously, there is a curfew, so things shut down around 11 o'clock. But the streets are still full of cars. People are still going about their work. Obviously, there are a lot of soldiers around. There are less men in the cafes and bars because a lot of men who are not already fighting at the front are worried about being conscripted into the military. A lot choose to stay home and are hiding from draft officers. So you notice curious things about the city. There's not very many children in Kiev these days. There's very few babies in Kiev. You notice that the birth rate has plummeted as a result of the war, and a lot of people have left the country. So there are curious things, but life does continue, and Ukrainians are determined to try and live their lives as much as they can.
Intriguing. Okay, well, thank you for your time, Maxim. Maxim Tucker is the Times' Ukraine correspondent, joining us live from Kiev just there.